everybody, thanks for joining me on my long commute home for another urban aviary video. I was looking around on the Facebook group this afternoon and saw a post that Leslie put up about how her quail got killed by a raccoon. She lost, I think she said 3 or 4 hens on the only rooster she had. From the sounds of it, it's all she's had is adults, raised adults. And she's wanting to know about chicks and raising chicks and taking some of the eggs she got and incubating them and raising some of her own chicks, and wanted to know, some advice on raising chicks. So I thought I'd talk about that for a minute. And the first thing I'll say is, if you can, when you have chicks, you'll want to keep your brooder inside. Keeping your brooder at the outside temperature at a decent room temperature, somewhere in the 68 to 72 degree range is nice, because it makes it a lot easier to regulate the heat inside the brooder. Like for me, something I learned the hard way this last few weeks is in the garage it gets really hot, and I would feed the birds and water them in the morning, and they would run out of water in the afternoon. By the time I get home in the evening, they've drank all the water and they're really thirsty. And so when I put water in there for them, they're getting in there, and just like you and me, when we get really thirsty and we drink a glass of water and we don't really care if we're splashing ourselves and get it running down our chin and dripping it all over ourselves. Well, that's what was happening with the birds. They were getting in there and flipping water all over the place, and they would get absolutely soaking wet. And even though it's hot in the garage, even with or without the heat lamp on, they would get cold, and they'll get like that when they're chicks. If they get cold, even when they're pretty well feathered out, or when they get wet, they'll get cold, no matter whether there's heat in there or not. And so they'll all huddle up into a corner to try and get warm, and then the first ones that made it to the corner end up getting smushed against the side and get smothered. So that's something I learned the hard way, is make sure you have plenty of water in there with them if it's going to be hot. If it's warm enough in the garage, you won't need to have the heat lamp on, but they still should be all right as long as you've got plenty of water for them. And then you can also, if it gets hot like that, put water bottles, frozen water bottles in there that they can huddle up against. That'll help. And then no matter what you do when you're setting up your brooder, you want to put your heat lamp on one end of the brooder so that they can get under there to get warm, and then get away to the other end to escape the heat if they get too hot. And when you're deciding and determining how far away to put the lamp to the brooder, you don't need to worry about a specific temperature inside the brooder. People ask that question a lot. What temperature does it need to be inside the brooder? Just watch the chicks. Set the heat lamp up however you do, if it clamps to the side or you have it hanging down over it. Just make sure it's to one side, and start out where you think it should be. Let the birds be there for 10-15 minutes, and then watch and see what they do. If they're all huddling up underneath the light together, they're too cold. The lamp needs to be closer. If it's too far away from them, if it's too far away, they'll be huddling and close together. If it's too close to them, they'll be spread out away from it. You want them to be loosely gathered together underneath the heat lamp, and that's what it'll look like if you've got it set up right. But like I said, if your garage is hot or you have it somewhere really warm, you won't really need it. If you notice that you've got the heat lamp on and they're all crowded to the other side away from it, and then you shut the heat lamp off, and then they're still keeping crowded away from it for a little bit until the lamp cools down, and it might be plenty warm in there. Just watch them after you turn the heat lamp off if you have them somewhere hot, and watch what they do. Do they spread back out and they're all happy and they're all over in the brooder and doing okay, or then do they huddle back together and you need to adjust your lamp? So it makes it a lot easier if you just have them inside. But so let's get to basically what their needs are, which is just like the other video I did on their basic needs. They need 4 things: food, water, shelter, security. Food, it's the same stuff you feed them their whole life. A game bird starter or a turkey starter will have the protein content that you need for them, that they can eat that same feed their whole life. But it's really important when they're young, when they're little like that, to get that protein content. Otherwise, it's going to stunt their growth. They're going to grow slower. They'll survive if you feed them just 18% chicken feed, but they're not going to get the growth rate that they normally will, and I don't know that they'll ever actually reach the full potential that they should. So make sure you feed them the right feed. Minimum 24% protein, and it has to be in a mash when they're that young, so they can get it down and get it processed. The next thing, water. Like I said, make sure they always have access to water. And I like to set it up in the brooder. I use shavings, and I like to put a brick down and then put the water on top of the brick, and then put the shavings in evenly so that it's up to the right level where the chicks are standing on the shavings and can reach up into the waterer, so that they don't have to get down into it, because that's when they get wet and make a mess. So if you can do that, It's really nice if you have the chick waterers, the mason style jar chick waterers, because they don't really make much of a mess in it unless they're super thirsty and they're flicking it all over the place. So those are really nice to have. But if you have one of the standard mason jar waterers, you might want to put rocks and stones around in it and put it up to that level so that they have to pick between the rocks to get the water and can't get up in it and play in it, or just walking around in it playing in it. Because like I said, if they get wet, they can get cold and they can freeze even if the heat lamp's in there at a good enough distance. So food and water, two main things, and the other two are shelter and security, and they kind of go together. The shelter is the brooder, obviously. We talked about that. I use a Rubbermaid tote just because it's easy. I can go pick it up at Home Depot or Walmart. But if you want to do a wood box, or however you want to do it, is fine. Just make sure that you're keeping predators out, and if you're keeping them in the house, that's going to be your house cats and your dogs. And if you're keeping them in a garage, rats are going to be your biggest concern. Assuming that you don't have raccoons or other things getting in your garage, but rats are the most common thing that will get in your garage. And then the other part of the security equation is keeping them secure from the elements. So obviously don't keep them outside. Don't keep them outside with a heat lamp in the sunlight, direct sunlight. It could get too hot, especially if you got the heat lamp adjusted right for indoors, and then take them outside. So don't keep them outside. Keep them out of that sunlight, keep them out of the rain and the wind, obviously, because that can kill them just like the adults. And then once they're feathered out, probably about 3 weeks to be safe, they're pretty well able to, as long as it's not freezing cold outside, they don't need to be right directly under a heat lamp. I mean, if you're in the depths of winter, it's still a good idea to do that until they're 4 or 5 weeks old, just to be safe. But in the summertime, by the time they're 3 weeks, they're pretty well feathered out, and they don't really need to be under a heat lamp anymore. Then your, bigger concern is them overheating, not freezing, assuming they don't get wet. So most stuff I was talking about was for the first week or two when they're just little chicks. But as they grow, and they grow pretty rapidly, you can start treating them more like adults as they get older and get their adult feathers. That's about all there is to it, guys. I will put a link in the description to that quail and chick waterer base for the mason jar style waterers. So if you're interested in that or wanting to know what that looks like, I'll put a link to that. And until that next video, remember, you guys can do this too.